Hey everyone, and welcome to Almost Cancelled. I am Peter, that is Connor, and we are going to talk about True Detective Season 3, Episodes 1 and 2. The first one is called The Great War and Modern Memory, and the second one is called Kiss Tomorrow Goodbye. So, yeah, I guess we could start spoiler-free for these, because they are...
Yeah, I think we should.
Yeah, because it's an anthology, and it's a new story, so you could just jump out of this season. There's no reason why you couldn't. And... you might wisely have skipped season 2.
I only watched one episode and then thought, do you know what? I don't need this in my life.
I saw the whole thing. I saw the whole thing and it was
I,
dire.
I would have sympathy, but you did it to yourself.
Do you know what's so funny is that was so long ago that it was before we started doing these reviews. There's no individual reviews for True Detective Season 2.
Yeah.
Which is really funny. But yeah, so True Detective... had a very popular first season, had a very unpopular second season, went on a long hiatus, never technically got cancelled, but just kind of was gestating for a long time. It's the same creator still, although I remember news stories coming out that they had like other writers like helping them write the new season.
Yeah, it was the guy from Deadwood, right?
Yeah, which makes sense because the worst part about seasons, even one, which was the popular season, the worst part about it was still the writing, because it was good because of the style, the direction, the cast members, of course, in the lead roles. Yeah. That was why it was good. Season 2,
the writing was passable.
Yeah, it was still. I mean, the mystery was a bit convoluted. Like there was certain parts of it that just kind of.
The mystery was the dialogue was all right though.
Sure. Little, I quite say pretentious in places, but a little showy.
Yeah, I agree with
that. Season 2 dropped all the good elements, replaced them with bad, and kept the bad, or if anything, got made the bad worse. That's what happened to Season 2. Season 2 was dire. It was garbage. So, apologies for the bluntness, but it sucked.
Yeah, I know there's a handful of defenders for Season 2 out there for some reason.
Yes, noble, brave warriors who will stand in the face of reason and defend True Detective Season 2. So, it's weird coming out of Season 3 because obviously it's in this place where no one really likes Season 2, apart from the aforementioned minority. Season 3, you get Mahershala Ali in the lead role, and it's like, okay, right, we got a good cast member.
Yeah,
right,
yeah, definitely. He's a fantastic actor. No getting around that.
Good lead actor. We hear it's set over 3 decades, and we're like, okay, so that maybe makes me think of Season 1 a bit more because you had the interview sort of set up where it was like the 2 timelines. This just adds an extra layer onto it where there's a third one. And... yeah, other than that, I didn't really know anything about it. We saw the trailer, but I don't think I really... if I knew anything about what the case was, I'd forgotten it before I watched this.
I don't think we did, because I think after Season 2, we didn't care enough to look.
that's a
genuinely, that was how I felt. I was like, sure, I'll check it out, but I'm not excited for it in any way.
Yeah, also, I'm just noticing the director of this first episode.
Yeah, and the second one.
So it's the same director?
Yeah.
Jeremy Saulnier, who did Blue Ruin and Green Room, directed the first 2 episodes. That's cool. Did he do all 8?
I don't know.
I don't know either.
You can check.
I can check. Yeah, hold on. I'm inquiring to this because I actually.
Because obviously, the first season was all done by one director. I don't know if the second.
I'm looking at 6 and 8.
Yeah.
No, 6 is different, and then I presume 8 will.
Yeah, because obviously these are essentially a double pilot for all intents and purposes. It's not uncommon to get a guest director, a bit of a bigger name for these.
The reason why I checked 6 and 8 is because I thought even if he might come back for the finale, so I wanted to check one in the middle as well.
Yeah.
So no, but Jeremy Saulnier, good director. The plot of the show, keeping this spoiler free, just giving you a general outline, is about a pair of children, a brother and sister, who go missing in 1980, which is where I'd say the bulk of the story takes place. And then there's some stuff in 1990 where stuff developed a bit again with the same character, the same detective, Mahershala Ali's character. And then you have a sort of, I think he said 2015 at one point.
I think it was, yeah.
Was the newest timeline where he's an old man and he's kind of reflecting on everything. So that's kind of your basic setup of the show. You've got other actors in there. You've got Stephen Dorff as his partner in 1980. You've got Scott McNeary as the father of the kids who goes missing. The mother of the kids who goes missing, I kept second guessing and thinking it was Dawn from True Detective because she looks a lot like her. It's not. I checked.
It never crossed my mind.
there was moments, there was certain like sentences she would say, and their face would make this give this look, and I'm like, that was so dumb. And then there was other times I was like, nah, I don't think it is. But I was like, I was wondering if the blonde hair was throwing me, because obviously she's Ginger and Mr. Robot, but she looks similar, but not her. So you get that Ray Fisher cyborg from Justice League's in here, and we got Carmen Ejogo as well as the kind of the main love interest for the detective. So detective's named Wayne. He's our main character, and it's kind of about how big a deal this case is, and he's being questioned about it in 1990 by other officers because there's new information that's came to light, and then in present day, and I say present day, 2015, he's being questioned kind of willingly by a documentary crew who are doing like a TV show about the subject. So that's your basic setup. So I actually get to, even though it's season 3, I get to ask this question, and it's actually kind of it, because I did my live stream earlier today, and I'd already watched the episodes, and some people were asking me what I thought, and I said, you know what, I'm not going to tell you, because I think for this show in particular, saying what I think of the new season is actually a spoiler for this review.
It is, yeah, because it's not like, oh yeah, we like it, same old, right?
It's
and
actually,
we're on season 3.
Yeah, it's actually kind of curious, because season 2 was so bad. I think there's almost some anticipation behind what do people think of season 3, not us specifically, just in general. So Connor, did you enjoy these first 2 episodes of True Detective season 3?
It's all right. I don't love it. I definitely like it more than season 2.
Oh sure,
don't get me wrong.
No question, yeah.
I definitely like it less than I did the first episode of season 1.
I wish I could remember how I felt about the first, because I remember True Detective season 1 not really grabbing me until that oneer at the end of like 3 or 4.
Okay, so I remember being into it from the start.
I remember thinking it was a little bit plodding at first, but I think I have kind of a different opinion of each episode here. I think episode 1 is a bit stronger.
Oh yeah, definitely.
And I think what I liked about episode 1 is that I felt like it didn't make things too complicated. It made it, obviously you have the jump in timelines, but the actual case itself is very simple. Kids go missing. Here's all the people who might have seen them, who are or another ways might have been implicated and been involved in it. But it's very simple. Kids go missing, the reaction of the parents, reaction of the detectives, the first kind of thing. And then, of course, as we talk about often with pilots or first episodes, and this isn't a pilot per se, but it's kind of functioning as one.
Yeah.
Is the hook at the end. There's some extra element that you didn't see coming that hooks it in. Which, admittedly, I did get a little bit skeptical when they first showed something, because I thought, is this just trying to recapture something from season 1? There was an element where I went, it feels like they're maybe just... You know.
Do you know what I think is maybe one of my biggest problems, which is not necessarily to say that it's bad, is that it doesn't have any of the surrealism or and especially the imagery that season 1 had that kind of set it apart from just being another crime show.
Yeah.
Like this here, it feels competent, but it doesn't feel like it's something special apart from the pack, something different.
Now, Ali is definitely the best part of the show.
Without doubt.
He's acting up a storm. There's elements that, I mean, there was a couple of moments in the first episode specifically where I felt like it was actually almost cheesy how they were handling something. There's the scene where the kids are riding off on their bikes. They go past these teenagers in a car, and it's in slow motion as they stare at the kids, and the kids stare back at them. And it went on so long that it just felt silly, because I'm like, even if these teenagers are actually the killers or involved in some other way.
Yeah, it was one of those of like, hey, look, they saw them.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, okay, I bloody get it.
Yeah, they were really staring at us because everyone else, it was fine. The trash man they go past, like that slowed down a little bit enough to notice them and establish that he was seeing them, but it wasn't like ridiculous.
It was much more extreme with the kids.
Yeah. So there was that moment, and there was one or two other moments where it felt like it lingered on a serious look too long, where it felt like we're a serious show, we're doing a serious dramatic moment.
Yeah, I don't, I like Solnier as a director from what I've seen. I don't think this is as strong as Fukunaga's direction in the first season.
No,
nowhere near.
No, but I do like the more simple plot. I like that it's about the impact that it's had on him, personally, and it does have this feeling of spanning all this time, and You know, I think the first episode does a good job in two ways of, because there's actually two hooks at the end. There's two interesting hooks at the end. What one is in the 80s and one is in the 90s, and they're both pretty decent hooks.
Yeah, I see. For me, most of it at the moment, the 90s feels kind of superfluous. Like I feel like I could be telling this story comfortably from 2015, and back to the 80s and go forward from there, and I don't know. I feel like it's a bit of a gimmick the way it's jumping to the 90s as the extra timeline.
I don't know, because I think the point is that it died down for years and then came back in 1990, 10 years later.
Yeah, I get that. I think for me, it takes away some of the mystery of what's happening in the 80s. I'd rather just move through the 80s and then jump, and then with him telling the story, jump ahead to the
then.
90s.
That's something they could win you over with that as the show goes on.
They could, but as I said, right now that's how I'm feeling.
Because there could be more things that kind of,
justify it and make it worth it. Yeah.
Because there's some stuff we learn in the 80s at the end of episode 1 that it neatly doesn't tell us about in the 90s section until it's revealed in the 80s section.
Yeah.
The writing's kind of neat in that sense, and how it's making sure it doesn't reveal things that obviously the later timeline knows about. The characters in the later timeline obviously know these details, but they do a neat job of not having it, reveal anything too early or whatever. So yeah, I liked episode 1 pretty much in a solid way. I didn't love it, but I thought it was solid. Episode 2 I thought was a little bit more plodding. I felt the pacing and there wasn't as much plot really in episode 2 to keep it going.
I agree. It felt like, maybe, I don't know if this is actually true, but it's the way it felt. It felt like it was splitting between the timelines more. I didn't get. It felt there was less of the 80s, which is the core focus.
There was definitely more 2015 in the second episode.
Yeah,
and that has its own kind of hook at the end, which isn't as effective, I don't think, as the first.
First was not a fan of that.
I get what it's doing in terms of the plot, and
it came across as cheesy and cliche.
Yeah, I did like the music that played out as it went though. It almost felt like Silent Hill music as it was going out.
I can't be that. Some nice music.
Because there's not a whole lot of music in this show, really. There's a lot of quiet. There's a lot of quiet.
There is a lot of quiet. Yeah.
It's very much the style of the show. So we'll give a spoiler warning. I just wanted to do this quick spoiler-free section to give you a sense of like how we felt. It's better than season 2 by quite a margin. Is it exciting though?
I don't know.
Is it exciting? Are we determined to continue? Are we determined to find out the end of the mystery? Are we coming back next week for episode 3? Because we actually considered, because we were speaking about this yesterday, is that we'll watch episode 1, and if it was obvious by the end of episode 1 that we had no interest in watching more of it, we'd just call it there and just review the first episode. But it wasn't actually like that. Episode 1 was pretty solid. It was like, okay, now we have to watch episode 2.
Yeah.
And we watched episode 2. And I feel less clear at the end of episode 2 how much I want to watch the rest of it.
Yeah, it's interesting because I am away the week of the last episode.
Of the finale, yes.
And
which presents an interesting conundrum. Do I review that final episode on my own, or does it wait a week before we can review it? Because Connor's not here.
And I think if you follow our channel, you'll know we've just been doing our Best of the Year awards. Mm-hmm. It'll be interesting when we get to the end of this. Should we stick with this throughout the whole season? And should we be feeling, maybe a bit more positive? Maybe we're feeling kind of how we are now. Who knows? There's a few more episodes to go yet. Don't get me wrong. But should it get to the end, do I finish the season? Do I find the time to watch that on my own? If you do a solo review, because I don't always.
I think you do because it's one episode. I think the tougher thing is when you miss a whole show. You miss a whole season.
Yeah, that's worse. But it will be a very telling sign for me of the quality of, maybe not if I watch it, but how quickly I decide to watch it.
Yeah. So I don't know. I don't know. Like I wouldn't say I'm excited, but I'm also not dreading the thought of watching the next one, because there's some shows that we try and we try and force our way through a few episodes to see if it gets better, and I actively start to dread the next one. And
Yeah, I'm
I
not at that stage, at least not yet.
yeah, I'm not at that stage with this. Like it's not that bad by any means, but
Because there's been times where we say, yeah, we'll do the next one, and then it comes to a few days later, and we go, oh, well, we'll watch the next one, and we're like, I don't want to.
yeah, we regret saying that.
Yeah,
We've come to regret that decision
which is
sometimes.
probably why we're being more cautious here now.
Yes, we're being cautious. Yes, but it wasn't bad by any means. Like some of the mystery is interesting.
Yeah.
I feel like with the stuff that's going to delve into, the thing that reveals at the end of episode 1, it implies, that it's not just a crazy dude who's come and killed them.
Mm.
Like that stuff's kind of interesting. Even though I kind of wanted to roll my eyes a little bit when they first started hinting at it, because it felt like, oh, season 1 had these extra elements, so we're going to do some of those again, and I think that's fine. I think the stuff you have to keep in True Detective, which I think was missing in season 2, if I remember correctly, is the interview side of it. I think the idea of looking at an old case later is maybe what I'd say is the concept of True Detective that makes it True Detective.
I would say it's that, and I think the buddy cop partnership is an integral part.
Sure, yeah, I can see that.
Which is maybe a concern that doesn't seem to be here in the later sections, right?
Yeah, because I mean, sure, you've got like his partner, and he's a fairly prominent part right now, but he's not the co-star of the show. Like
by no means, no.
Yeah. Ali's the star, and he is the sole star of the show.
Yeah.
So, it's hard to predict that, but yeah. So full spoilers. We'll do full spoilers now for episodes 1 and 2. So yeah. So the thing that it hints at is that, and I like this whole thing. I like one of the themes that it's playing back is that both the cops and a lot of the guys that are interviewing and the suspects, they're all people who were in Vietnam, because it's at that time period where people who came back from Vietnam would be about this age. Not, I mean, obviously there's a wide range, but like a lot of them at this age would have been in Vietnam, and I wonder if one of the themes going on throughout the season is how, like, what that did to a lot of people, and so for some people very, very extreme. I mean, hell, in episode 1 at one point, the partner talks about his buddy who ended up going to prison because he.
Yeah, I think they get a bit too on the nose with this.
Oh,
because
sure.
There's one point that I think it is Ali's character who says it in maybe in 2015, where he says, "Oh, back then I split everything into 2 times, before Nam and after."
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, okay, I get it.
And I'm thinking like the idea that if there is some satanic cult thing going on, that it's people who are affected by that, or unless it's younger people, which it could be, in which case it's like, no, this is like another ripple effect of the time period or whatever.
Yeah, it could be.
Because I like the whole thing where he's tracking, because Ali's character was a tracker in Vietnam, so he's like tracking in a way that other people can't.
Some clunky exposition to tell us this.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
I think it was the start of the 2nd episode where they're doing the search. They're all out in the line.
No, it's the end of the first one. It's before he finds the body.
Oh, you're right, it is. And he's off on his own, and the partner's talking to the sheriff, whoever it is. And he's like, why is he off? And he just tells us the whole thing. He's like, yeah, he was in Nam, he was a tracker, yada, yada, yada. I'm like, really? This is the best way to tell us this information that is quite interesting information. But, I mean, come on.
Again, exposition was a big problem in the previous 2 seasons. It really was. But no, I liked him tracking, because it did become just visual. It became him just looking on his own and tracking things. And he finds this creepy doll, this creepy like straw doll. It's almost like a Blair Witch-esque thing. And I thought, okay, I'm not necessarily hating the idea of this, but I rolled my eyes a little bit, because I'm like, yeah, because we had all the cult stuff in season 1, and I was like...
Which was a lot more interesting in terms of its imagery.
Yeah, it was more interesting, but I think it was just forgetting the imagery. I think just the concept was more interesting, because I've not seen a cop show do this. Not in a big way where it's the whole season and it's like the big story that revolves around this. Yeah. Whereas now we've done it already, and it's like, you're trying to recapture season 1. You're trying to recapture that, and he finds the body, and it's a fine scene. And because it made me think there's a scene in the middle. It was actually, as soon as he found the doll, I thought of this scene earlier on where they're interviewing one of the high school kids, and he's got a Black Sabbath t-shirt on, and was the partner's name? Roland. he's like, hey, what's this shirt? And he like points at his shirt and he's like, oh, it's a band, and it's Ali who jumps in and says, oh, it's a it's a satanic gathering. It's their church service essentially, and I didn't really see it as foreshadowing in the scene itself, but as soon as I saw the first doll, I went, okay, right, I see what you're doing.
Yeah.
I see exactly what you're doing. And it was fine. And then obviously the countered hook to that is in the 90s is that the fingerprint of the girl showed up in a store robbery, and clearly showing that she's still alive 10 years later. And it's like, wait, did she get like indoctrinated by this cult or whatever happened?
Yeah.
Was she raised, was she always part of the cult and she lured her brother into this? Like,
could have done.
Well, I say always, not always, but because we find out that
was she already part of it? Yeah.
A week before on Halloween, there's evidence to suggest that she was given one of these satanic dolls by someone, conveniently in ghost sheets because it was Halloween.
I mean, you get away with a lot of Halloween, don't you? I'll give it a pass.
So, I mean, that stuff's interesting. I think the mystery itself is fine. Yeah. Outside of a little bit of cynicism that it's maybe trying to recapture season 1 stuff.
It is. I feel bad for constantly comparing it to season. If this was a fresh show, I don't know if I'd necessarily be more positive on it. In fact, maybe I'd be the opposite. Maybe I'm more lenient because I'm like, well, you did knock it out of the park with at least one season.
It's hard to say.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe it's a little bit. Maybe they're resting on the name and hoping that there's enough there for it to, just residual liking it.
I don't think there's leniency though. I feel like everyone who didn't like season 2 comes into this needing to be proven to. Like we need to be. I think we come in going, all right, you have to impress us, or we're gone.
Yeah, and I don't think this knocked it out of the park in terms of, okay, here's your statement of why you should stick around, right? And why you should trust us.
Here's the weird thing. If this had been season 2, if this was the season 2 premiere episodes, this would have been like, oh, it's fine, yeah, it's not as solid as last season, but it's a decent enough start, we'll see where it goes. That'd be the attitude.
Probably.
But it's season 3 after season 2, it's like, okay, well, you had to kind of come in and prove yourself, and I don't think you quite got to that point. You definitely seem a lot more competent.
Yeah, definitely.
By a large stretch. And you've got a good cast, great lead with a good supporting cast, and there's some interesting scenes. There's one of the things they find in the first episode is there's a peephole in the son's closet, looking into I think the mother's room, or maybe it was his sister's room. I actually couldn't tell. It was clearly a women's dresser, but
I wasn't sure either. It didn't give us a clear shot.
Like I thought it was the sister, but it felt like the dresser felt like more of a grown-ups thing.
Yeah.
But the reason why I think it was the sister is because we find out that the wife's cousin was staying there in his room, and I assumed it was implying some sinister pedophile
so what's
stuff.
Interesting about that?
Yeah.
Is I was the way that they kept saying, oh, the husband, they started sleeping separately after the cousin came round. I was wondering, was it hinting at something between the wife and her cousin? Like genuinely, like the way that they kept going on about the timeline of those events.
Why would you need a peephole though if they were actually into something together?
I don't know.
If we're going down the cousins are at it with each other, then fine. But
yeah, I mean, hey, it worked for Game of Thrones.
But I assumed the peephole meant whoever he was watching was not aware or approved of what he was doing.
Oh, it's just true, or at least at first, right?
Sure. But there's some insinuations, and it's funny. It's almost because they find the Playboy magazines under the bed, and they're like, it's normal for a kid, whatever. Like, boy his age.
I appreciate they kind of just shrug it off because you would, right?
But I almost felt like later on it was kind of because they bring it up in reference when they're talking to the cousin in episode 2. I almost felt they were saying, "Oh, you're into Playboys and you've got a peephole. That make you must be the one behind the peephole because they're your Playboys because you're the pervert."
which was really counterintuitive when the Playboys were first brought up. The cop's like, hey, I ain't judging, I read them myself.
Yeah, and I guess the argument is that they're just using that as a lead-in to get to to go down that path to get them to that line of questioning. It felt like they were almost implying that he was more likely to be the one who made the peephole because he had Playboys, when, as they themselves acknowledged, a 12-year-old, really normal that he's seeking out some Playboys.
Yeah.
If they're his, and if they're not, even if it's a grown man, whatever, like it's still normal. So
Yeah, it is.
That was a little bit weird, but at least it's like, okay, what's going on in the house? What's the cousin up to? Also, the way the wife keeps like saying she needs a real man and things like that, and like maybe you're right. Maybe there is some sort of weird cousins thing going on here. Not that it's any less weird if it is the kid, but it's just if it's the kid, we're more focused on the paedophilia aspect of it rather than the
definitely
the relations of it. And because these cops aren't necessarily great characters, you get a sense that you're sympathetic with Ali's character Wayne, but
yeah, and he's more likable in the 90s than in 2015.
Yeah, he's definitely grown up, but he's clearly in a rough place in the 80s because he, like him and his partner, they're drinking on the job, they're hoping to avoid getting any cases, they're generally kind of shitty. They grab a guy, a perp, and beat him up. Who he's a registered sex offender, he's a paedophile, but just
because they can.
But it's not even so much that, I mean, not that I approve of police brutality, but it's not even so much that I actually have a problem with them doing that. It's more so much beforehand they're excited, like, oh, we need to beat someone up. I need to beat up a bad guy. Like
yeah, it's not like they're getting caught up in the heat of the moment.
Yeah,
they actively go looking for it, right?
Yeah, it's to vent off steam. They actually, they're enjoying doing it, and so that they're clearly messed up, and they're maybe not as messed up as other people who came back from Vietnam, but they're both clearly in a rough place.
Yeah, definitely.
And you get the impression that meeting his wife is kind of what turned him into a better man, because he meets her at the school. She's a teacher, and because we hear him mention that he's got a wife in the future at one point, and then we see them meet, and it's the way he's looking at her immediately. You're like, okay,
yeah.
Not just because it's the actress who I know is like the next lead in the show.
Yeah, but even if you don't know that, it confirms it pretty quickly anyway.
Yeah. Because at one point I think he even says she was a great teacher.
Yeah, it does.
Whereas it doesn't necessarily mean that she was an actual teacher, but it's a it's a neat little...
do we not see a picture in the book?
That's after.
Yeah,
that's after Mir. Yeah. But because he says she was a great writer, a great teacher, you're great at a lot of things. Well, it doesn't necessarily mean actual teacher in a school, but it
then
works.
You happen to meet a teacher,
and
it's like, well,
there's your link. Yeah, there's your connection. Again, I thought the way he was staring at her as soon as he first sees her was a little bit too much.
Cheesy.
Yeah. It wasn't, cheesy. It was, because it wasn't like it was disturbing. It was just kind of like they were holding this look too long. Like he's noticed her, so he's like entranced by the beauty.
It was that sort of cheesy thing that is in a different show or a movie is fine, but it is tonally inconsistent with what this is generally going for.
Yeah. And they're bonding. They end up meeting up. It's implied she might have a boyfriend right now, but they meet up a few times. She helps him with like spreading like the image of the doll around the school, and one of the kids has some information, which leads to the Halloween intel about the doll being given to her, and she helps him talk to the kids because they're not doing a good job. And there's although Ali does a little, he does okay. Like he tries to like talk about Star Wars and opens the kid up a little bit. Which is funny because you have to remember this would have been a couple of months after Empire came out.
Yeah, is this 1980 itself?
It's 1980, and they said that Halloween was a week ago, so this is November 1980.
Yeah.
So a few months. I assume it came out in summer. I imagine it did.
I would have assumed so.
I thought you were a Star Wars fan. You should know this.
I mean, maybe it came out in May. I don't know. I don't know.
For movies, that's still summer, right?
It is. I'm sorry, I don't know the exact date.
Yeah, Star Wars fan, my ass. So yeah. Do you know what I'm noticing though about us talking about this is that I feel like we're not being that enthusiastic. We're just relieved that it's not as bad as it could have been. We're pointing out obviously things that we don't think quite works, or little nitpicks here or there or whatever.
I think my biggest concern right now, in terms of our conversation, is we're not going, oh, is it this, is it that? There's no theorizing. We're barely analyzing because it's very expositionary and just kind of telling us. Okay, it's what they're telling us it is.
Yeah, we're not really digging into the drama of it all. I think one of the more interesting character beats is that in the future, 2015, when the filmmaker in episode 2 asks Wayne if he felt that his ideas or theories were ever debunked or ignored because of his race, He says no, not particularly. And it's a very believable answer the way he says it. And he asks, why are you asking that? And she gives this really like snotty, like, I've been studying this in university answer of, like taking his race and anything he's went through and boiling it down to an essay title. And because him and his son give each other this glance of like, what's she doing?
I think what is interesting though is he did feel that way.
Oh, he did. That's what I'm saying. That's why I'm saying it's interesting. I think the most interesting character beat is that we then see in the 80s that he does get shot down. And I was thinking in the scene that this feels like he's being shot down because of this. And then it's later on with his partner where he flat out implies it to his partner, like, maybe you could have stepped in and backed me up because they'd listened to you.
It felt like that, but I wasn't sure in the scene if he was maybe a little bit naive about it and didn't think that's why it was, right?
Yeah,
he just thought they were incompetent, maybe.
But no, that scene with his partner shows that he knows exactly what was going on in that scene. Yeah. To the point where he's like saying, hey, you should have came in and said something.
Yeah, and it mentions in 2015 that he's been forgetting things, which does make some of this story unreliable.
Yeah, it's interesting because he says he's reading from the book, and from his wife's book, who wrote about this case, and that's helping him remember things. Here's the thing though: is all of it from the perspective of 2015, or is a lot of the story from the perspective of 1990?
I think it's all from 15. Him telling them about 90, and then that is
okay.
It kind of goes back now. I say this because there's a moment in 2015 where he said no, that's enough for today. Yeah, but he says it in, I think it was the 80s, right? We see the younger version say it where
it does that a few times. But here's the thing, though. I think this would be a good idea for them to do, is play with the idea that he's unreliable because his memory's going. Because he's accused of his memory starting to go in 1990, but it seems to not be a big deal yet, right? It's something that maybe he's been technically diagnosed with something, but it's not like a huge issue yet. But in 2015, he leaves himself tape recordings in the morning to tell him about his day, so he knows what's happening. But at the same time, once he's got up in the day, it does seem like he's a bit out there at times, but he does seem to like handle himself well enough. He knows who he is, he knows who his family is, so on and so on.
Yeah, we see him zoning out a bit in the 90s. It could be played as he's just thinking about the day, he's a bit stressed, right? Yeah. But knowing where it's going in 2015, it's more likely that it's an early symptom, right?
The weird thing is, though, is that again in those scenes, I don't think it plays that way that well, because it seems more like he's just concerned about the case because he's distraught about the new development.
No, I agree, but I'm assuming that it's both.
But this is what I'm getting at, though, is this thing about his unreliable memory. I think that's an interesting thing that they should do. I'm not convinced they're going to. I'm not convinced.
Oh, really? Okay.
Because to me, it didn't feel that they were doing that. Everything I'm seeing in the 80s, it feels accurate.
No, I agree that it does. I'm only questioning it because they told me repeatedly that he was having memory problems. So I'm questioning it just on, we've done this enough times now to know that, okay, things can be unreliable. But they don't actually give any hint in the filmmaking that it could be. Yeah. I agree with that.
To the point where if they do pull that route, I actually might criticise that the film, because the only thing we have to go on is some of those transitions. At one point the light goes out and then it cuts to 2015 and it's the his key lights went out in the room, and that's like, but it plays purely as just transitional things, not as actual. It does, things that are slipping in and out.
There's no point they ever really question the story. There's no point where he's going, do you know what, I don't really remember, let me think about it and come back to you.
And the other thing is I don't necessarily know if I agree that everything's been told from 2015, especially since everything he's telling is being corroborated to some extent in 1990 by the other people, because they've got the records. They're talking about them and they're making them like confirm everything, essentially. Obviously, there's the joke early on where they ask him what he was doing that night. He's like, "Oh, we're working cases," and then it cuts to them sitting drinking beer.
It's the first time you see them in the 80s. Yeah.
Yeah. So clearly, obviously, there's parts that he's not telling them about. But I mean, I think given that you're set up that he has memory loss issues, that would be an interesting thing to play with.
It should have been playing with it more already.
Yeah. Maybe the argument is that this case, because of what it done to him and what it is in his life, is that this is the one thing he's not forgotten about at all.
Which would track if he didn't need to read the book to remember that.
True.
Because that tells me already that, okay, it's not as clear as it could be. Even if it's, once he's reading it, it's coming back to him. Sure.
Yeah.
But it's not as clear as it could be. It's not perfect, is the point.
Yeah, that's true. I don't know. I didn't get anything in the filmmaking of the 1980 stuff that any of it was remotely unreliable.
I agree. I absolutely agree. Like I said, I'm only
Yeah.
assuming that they were going to go down that route because of them telling me that in the 2015, just in dialogue.
Yeah.
There's nothing in the direction, in the style, or even in any of the moments outside the transitions that actually feel like it's unreliable.
Yeah, it's actually it's almost a lose-lose at this point because I feel like they should do something with it, and I'd hope the style would be there. But if they do pull this now, it's like, okay, you told me in the dialogue that this is possible, but nothing in the actual story itself felt like it could be a
Yeah,
lie or mistaken or.
to compare it to another, a show that was not too dissimilar a time, Mr. Robot, right?
Mm.
Very unreliable narrator, but it plays with that from the start, so that when it turns out, okay, no, this was unreliable, you don't feel like you're being shafted because you understand from the start that things might not be how they seem.
Do you know the thing is, though, it's not even a fair comparison because to make it even, at the start of Mr. Robot, someone would have to have absolutely outright said, hey, by the way, this might be unreliable.
Yeah, you kind of just get that through context in Mr. Robot. You understand pretty quickly because of the way it's filmed, because of the frankly stunning stellar direction.
They've basically told us that he's unreliable, perhaps, but nothing in the filmmaking tells me it is. So even though I agree that theoretically they've set it up, I don't actually feel it at all in the show.
I agree.
So I don't think they should now. Because it doesn't feel like it, I don't think they should.
But also at the same time, now if they don't, I feel like what was the point in spending all the time telling us that he's, being so forgetful, and what are we going to do with that instead?
I assume it's character stuff. In the future, I don't know.
Yeah.
Um,
It is kind of a lose-lose situation, isn't it? Because if they don't now, it's like, well, you missed something. There's probably, a very interesting way to differentiate it from the first season.
yeah. That he's unreliable in what he's saying. Here's what I would do, because I don't necessarily believe that all the stories come from 2015. I would eventually have him contradict himself, like between 2015 and 1990.
Okay.
And that's how you show that things might not always match. Like,
Yeah.
and that would maybe work in this style where it's not actually been unreliable yet, because we're getting most of the information from 1990.
Okay.
So then eventually when they do play something, it's like, okay, it's only unreliable from one of the time periods, kind of thing. I don't know.
Yeah.
I assume that in 1990 he's going to go investigating himself again to try and find the door.
I think so, yeah. Which is why I feel like this is from 2015 telling the story, because he's going to be telling that part as well, which loops all the way back round to my feeling at the start, this discussion where I said I think this should be more chronological. Have the 2015 as the framing, and cut back to the 80s and then to the 90s. I don't feel like.
I assume he'll be back and telling them the story though in the 90s. It won't just be him doing other stuff.
Maybe, yeah.
I have to imagine they're going back to that. See if he never goes back to that table and never tells them anything else in the 90s. I'll agree with you, but right now,
That's fair.
I assume he's going back, and then that would justify why we have both if something contradicts eventually.
If there is a contradiction, yeah.
And then that makes us go, oh wait a minute.
Yeah, that would be more interesting, definitely.
Yeah. And I wonder as well, like, if they play with this idea that because he's grown and he's become a better person maybe over the years, that, like, does his lack of memory actually help him figure something out in a way, because he'll think about something differently that he wouldn't have done when he had all the facts in his head. I don't know. I'm spitballing.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I can't dispute that.
I don't know. I'm just, yeah. Do we want to watch more of it though?
Do I want to?
I guess the real question is it worth spending time on this every week instead of using that slot for other things like we could be?
Here's a question.
Yeah.
If we didn't do this show at all, right? Forget time as a factor.
Sure.
You watch these episodes just like you did with season 1 before. I don't think you reviewed season 1, did you at all?
We kind of did.
Okay.
It was a different format at the time.
I remember season 2. I don't remember season 1. But let's just say you were watching this just of your own free time. You were like, hey, I'm going to check out this show.
Oh no,
Would
you're
you
right.
come
You're right. It
back
was
for
season
more?
2. I never reviewed season 1. You're right.
Yeah. So
I'm mixing seasons up. Let's say.
if this was kind of just like, here's a new season, here's a show, would you come back next week?
Maybe. I oddly, I think it'd almost be more likely to come back if it was a new show, because it would be more of an unproven quantity.
No. Assume it was still this season 3. I meant new season rather than new show. But assume it was still the same situation. But we weren't doing any reviews. You don't do TV reviews. This is just you're one of our listeners.
If I didn't review things, would I come back for episode 3 after these 2?
Yeah.
Probably not.
Right. It's a very telling answer, isn't it?
Probably not. It's not terrible. It's not bad. There's definitely things to like in there. But I think what you said earlier also holds true, is that we've not really been sitting theorizing about who the killer could be or what's really going on, because I don't really care that much. Like, I think the mystery's okay. I like kind of what it's poking at, but I'm not intrigued or like going, oh, this is like a great mystery. This is like
there's definitely, we've covered other mysteries before where I mean, just look at Homecoming, from Amazon last year. We did, after the first 2 episodes, we were like, okay, I'm into the mystery now.
Yeah, we went nuts on the mysteries and that, and it ended up in a much simpler show in the end. But like, yeah, there's no desire for me to sit and like theorize on what's going on here, which is maybe a sign that we shouldn't cover any more of it, because ultimately,
how interesting is that going to be?
Yeah, like either we're theorizing and things like that, we're talking about like themes and what things mean, or we're talking about character progression and motivations.
Yeah. Like I said, I feel all the themes in this are very surface level. I don't feel there's much depth here. Any of the times where it feels like, okay, the idea of even the thing we really liked, the idea of, okay, but it was an issue of race in terms of with the other police, right? It's still very surface level. It's just, okay, it's there, right? It
because I never even
do anything deeper with it.
I never even finished my point on that, actually. Like, because then I question: is it because he's forgetting that, or is it because he is choosing not to respond to that? He doesn't want to talk about it. He doesn't want to bring that up and make that part of the story.
Yeah. Maybe he doesn't want to throw his old colleagues under the bus.
I don't know if it's about them. I think it may just be about, he doesn't want that to colour the the story of what she's doing. She doesn't want that to become the focus.
He doesn't want it to seem like he's a jaded old man going, oh, I could have done better.
Yeah, like, I think it's interesting, his motivation for not just saying that and what that means for his character. But that was honestly the only thing out of the 2 episodes that made me go, this is a fascinating thing to think about with the character. Whereas you compare it to something like Better Call Saul, where we're talking about character motivations and how what's going on in their heads, like on every scene almost.
Yeah.
Whereas in this, I'm not quite feeling the pull to do that. So.
Nor am I.
I guess you've talked me out of it. So.
Which was not my intention, because if you'd been like, oh, I really want to watch more, I'd have kind of gone, all right then. But. We don't have any enthusiasm for it, do we?
Not really. Do you know what the sad thing about this is? This is, no matter what, we're going to disappoint people here, right? Because if we said, if we're saying now we're not doing it anymore, right? Inevitably, there's going to be some people who were like, oh no, we would have wanted you to review the whole thing. And obviously, a lot of our audience are intelligent and fair people, and would understand their reasons, right? But there's always that subset who get really annoyed and are really angry and want us to keep going. And it's like, with those people, it's a lose-lose, because either they're angry we're not doing it at all, or they're just going to be annoyed that every week we're just kind of about it.
Yeah, we can be negative on a show consistently if we feel like there's things to add to that, constructively add to that discussion.
Yeah.
Whereas my fear here is that we're not even going to be that negative. We're kind of going to be apathetic.
Yes, apathy leads to bad discussion, and I don't think that actually serves anyone any good. And I think the thing for people who do get angry that we're not trying more of it is, if they love the show, and I'm not talking about specifically about True Detective, I'm just thinking in general about some other examples that I've got in my head, is They seem to think that, oh, there'll be that episode, like, you know, you get episode 4 because that's going to be the one that proves you wrong. You're going to be like, no, the show was great all along, and this was the one that proved it. And don't get me wrong, there is a rare occasion where a show can flip your opinion and it can elevate itself, but it's not the common thing. It's not that common. It is the rare thing for that to happen, and it's excellent when it does.
Yeah, and often, depending on when it falls in the season, I question if it was worth it. Like I know Game of Thrones, right? There was a season where I stopped watching because I came back late because they went past the books, and I felt like I had to because otherwise people were going to ruin it for me. But I stopped watching because it was just like, do you know what? This season isn't very good. I'm not enjoying it that much. And then I stopped at maybe episode 3 or 4, and then it was like episode 8 or 9. Everyone was going, but that episode's amazing. It's fantastic. You've got to watch it. You've got to get to that episode. And I didn't bother at the time. Obviously, I went back later when the next season was starting. I went and caught up, and I got to that episode. I went, yeah, it was a good episode, but it wasn't worth the previous 8. It wasn't good enough to lift up all of that.
Yeah,
and I feel like that's more often than not how I feel with that sort of scenario.
Do you know? I've just noticed that my camera's a little bit in the desaturated side for some reason right now. I never noticed that. I just noticed it there compared to yours. Oddly though, it means I'm more in tone with the show for this episode, because this was very much the color scheme of the show.
It was, yeah.
So yeah, I mean that's the first episode of True Detective season 3. It's not bad. It's better than season 2, but ultimately we're just not enthusiastic about it. And I think that just leads to poor discussion. I don't think you'll get anything out of this. I think eventually we will get to that point where maybe we are dreading watching it. Not because it's the worst thing ever, but just because it's a full hour long. It's taken a slot in a week where we could be doing other things.
I would rather come to this, this conclusion now of, do you know what, we're just not going to do it, than be dreading. It's not even about dreading it, but if we get 4 episodes in and then being like, I don't want to watch this anymore, but we're halfway through now. So do I feel obligated to try and finish it? Whereas now...
And that arguably pisses off people more, because there's an expectation once you're halfway through that you should probably finish it.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So
yeah, we've had that before.
I think we're going to call it, and we'll dive into other shows, and we can use that time for other things in the schedule that have maybe been neglected recently.
We have plans. So... Do you know what I think is one of the most interesting things about this discussion and us making that choice now? Is even before we start, we started this spoiler discussion, we brought up the idea of, are we going to continue next week? And we kind of never got to an answer. And I don't think we knew an answer till after we had the discussion and kind of realized that we don't have that much to say overall.
Pretty much. It may also be a sign we're just getting better at calling this.
It might.
Experience of like shows, and when do we drop them, when do we not?
No, but I mean in the sense that, like, coming into this review, I wasn't really sure, like, oh, do I want to watch it, do I not? But now that we spoke about it, I've seen the discussion that we've just had, and I'm like, yeah, I don't think we need to watch it. Our discussion has helped me come to that conclusion, which maybe we should pay attention to ourselves a bit more often.
Aye. There we go. There you go. That's our discussion about seasons 3, episodes 1 and 2 of True Detective. Clearly, I almost said something completely different there, but that's okay.
Yeah, you did.
But no. So it is good. It's good.
Good's a strong word.
It's fine. It's fine with some promising elements. But ultimately we're not that into it. So let us know what you thought of the premiere, and the comments, like and subscribe, all that stuff. Get us on the Twitters at mailed_fuzz for channel updates. If you want to support the show and the channel, head over to patreon.com/mailfuzztv, and you can do that over there. But otherwise, that is us. So thank you once again for watching or listening. We always appreciate it. Keep watching TV, guys. Have you got any vanilla?